The observation deck of the Kael'thor research vessel hummed with the low frequency that all Vryn ships maintained, a sound that kept their predatory instincts calm during long voyages. Vesha stood before the transparent aluminum barrier, her 4 eyes fixed on the human below, all of her visual processors struggling to comprehend what she was witnessing. The human designation, Dr. Sarah Chen, was doing it again. Tor. Vesha clicked, her mandibles twitching with confused fascination. Come see this. Her research partner materialized beside her, his scaled form considerably larger than hers. Tor was a decorated hunter from the southern clans, someone who had taken down prey 3 times his size. Yet here he was, watching a human perform the most mundane task in the universe, utterly transfixed. Is she stacking food again? Tor asked, his vocal sac inflating with interest. Yes, the ritual she calls making a sandwich. Below them, in the human habitat section of the Joint Research Station, Sarah moved with practiced efficiency. 2 slices of processed grain substrate, a protein layer, some kind of preserved meat, vegetation, both green and red varieties. A yellow semi-solid they had identified as coagulated lactose. Another protein layer, a thin spread of crushed plant seeds mixed with oil, then the second grain slice on top. She pressed down gently. The construction held. Then she lifted it, opened her small mouth, ridiculously small. Vesha noted, barely large enough to deliver a killing bite, and took a portion into her mouth. Incredible, Vesha whispered. She doesn't even unhinge her jaw. And the layers don't fall apart, Tor added, leaning closer to the glass. How does she calculate the structural integrity? This was their 5th rotation studying human dietary behaviors, and they still couldn't understand it. The Vryn ate their food in order of preference. Protein first. Always. Then, carbohydrates if still hungry. Vegetables only if absolutely necessary or during mating season. The concept of combining all 3 simultaneously, in a specific order, with exact proportions, it defied every instinct they possessed. I'm going to try it, Tor announced suddenly. What? The sandwich. I'm going to make one. Vesha's mandibles clacked in alarm. That's highly irregular. We're observers. Not. But Tor was already moving toward the habitat entrance. Vesha hesitated only a moment before following. Her scientific curiosity overwhelmed her. Caution. A very human trait. She realized with some discomfort. Sarah looked up from her lunch to find 2 very large, very carnivorous-looking aliens standing in her kitchen area, staring at her with the intensity usually reserved for prey animals. Hello? She said, setting down her sandwich. Can I help you? Vesha stepped forward, her translation collar flickering to life. Make sandwich. Like human, Sarah blinked. In 3 months of living on this joint research station, the Vryn had been polite, but distant. They observed everything, recorded everything, but rarely interacted directly. And now they wanted to make sandwiches? Oh, sure, yeah, I can show you how. What followed was perhaps the most surreal cooking lesson in human history. Sarah walked them through each step, explaining the concept of complementary flavors, structural balance, and textural variety. Tor listened with the intensity of a student learning quantum physics. Vesha took notes on a holographic display that appeared above her forearm. So the grain substrate provides the structural foundation, Tor repeated, placing 2 slices on the counter with surprising gentleness for someone with claws. Then, we layer. Summer. 8. 2. Right. Sarah encouraged. Now, what kind of protein do you like? Tor reached into the cooling unit and pulled out an entire raw steak, something Sarah had requested from Earth supply drops. He placed it directly on the bread. The whole thing. Uncooked. Still dripping. Maybe. Cut it to size? Sarah suggested diplomatically. Tor's eyes widened. Cut the meat? But then, the blood escapes. That's kind of the point for a sandwich. Reluctantly, Tor sliced the meat. Then, Following Sarah's instructions, he added cheese, lettuce, tomato. Each item placed with surgical precision. When he finally completed the construction and pressed the top slice down, his vocal sac inflated so large Sarah worried it might pop. "I have made sandwich," he announced, with the pride of someone who had just solved interstellar travel. Vesha completed hers moments later, though she had used 3 different types of meat and forgotten the vegetables entirely. "Now you eat it," Sarah said, demonstrating by taking another bite of her own. Both Vryn lifted their sandwiches. Tor attempted to bite into his the way Sarah had, but his mouth was too large. The sandwich disappeared in one gulp. He stood very still for a moment, processing. "The flavors," he said slowly. "They combine in the mouth, all at once. Sweet and salt and fat and acid. It's transcendent." Vesha finished, having had more success by tearing hers into smaller portions. This is why humans conquered their world. This level of innovation. This mastery of complexity. 3 weeks later, Vesha stood in the station's main cafeteria, watching in horror and fascination as a group of young Vryn cubs from the education wing presented their project to the station commander. They had built a tower. A massive, teetering tower made entirely of raw meat, vegetation, and what appeared to be crushed grain, mixed with some kind of binding agent. "We call it human food," the smallest cub announced proudly. "We learned from observing Dr. Chen that humans achieve superiority through vertical food integration and structural eating." The cubs had been watching from the education deck. Of course they had. Young Vryn absorbed everything like sponges. Commander Threll, a grizzled veteran with scars across his hunting crest, stared at the meat pile. "This is human culture?" "Yes, Commander," the cubs chirped in unison. Sandwich methodology applied to traditional Vryn cuisine. Sarah, who had been called to the cafeteria to explain, could barely contain her laughter. "Well, you've definitely captured the spirit of experimentation." Tor appeared beside Vesha, watching the cubs with something like pride. "We have introduced a revolution in Vryn food culture." "We've introduced chaos," Vesha corrected, but her mandibles twitched in what might have been a smile. The smallest cub took a running leap and bit into the meat pile. The entire structure collapsed, covering the cub and 3 others in raw protein and vegetables. They emerged victorious, chittering with joy. "Human food successful," they declared. Commander Threll turned to Sarah. "What have you done to our cubs?" Sarah grinned. "I made them a sandwich. Everything else? That's all them." And in that moment, Vesha understood something profound about humans. It wasn't their technology, or their diplomacy, or their warfare that made them remarkable. It was this: their ability to take something as simple as stacked food and turn it into a cultural exchange, a teaching moment, a bridge between species. Humans didn't just survive, they shared. And somehow, in that sharing, they transformed everything they touched. Even if it meant young Vryn cubs now built meat piles and called them human food.